She wasn't the kind of woman who turned heads when she walked into a room. Not in the way people meant when they said that. She didn't have the sharp cheekbones or the long legs, or the kind of effortless elegance that made strangers stop mid-sentence. What Willa Hart had was something quieter, something most people walked right past without ever noticing. A stillness, a watchfulness, the kind of eyes that counted exits before they counted faces. She had spent the better part of 3 years being invisible inside Castellan Group's corporate headquarters, and she had gotten very, very good at it. Her title was Senior Accounts Specialist. Her actual job was knowing exactly where every dollar went, where it came from, and which numbers on which ledgers were better left unasked about. She wore cardigans the color of office walls. She ate lunch at her desk. She said good morning to the people who passed her in the hallway, and most of them said it back without ever registering her face. That suited her just fine. The man who ran Castellan Group did not eat lunch at his desk. He didn't eat lunch at all, as far as Willa could tell. Dorian Shade moved through the building, the way a cold front moved through a city. You felt him before you saw him, and by the time he arrived, everyone around him had already adjusted. He was not handsome in any conventional sense. He was too severe for that. All sharp angles and controlled stillness, like something carved from a material that didn't allow for warmth. His hair was dark, silver at the temples. His suits cost more than Willa made in a month. He spoke in a voice that was almost always quiet, which somehow made it worse, because it meant the people around him leaned in to hear it, and leaning in was exactly where he wanted them. Willa had worked for Castellan Group long enough to understand what it actually was, long enough to know that the import-export subsidiary on the 14th floor existed for purposes that had nothing to do with imports or exports, long enough to understand why certain accounts were routed through 3 shell companies. Before they touched anything that looked like a real transaction, she understood it, she filed it, and she did not ask questions. That was the arrangement. That was how you survived. She had not expected to matter to Kim. She had not expected to matter to anyone if she was being honest with herself. And Willa Hart was almost always honest with herself, even when it hurt, because the alternative was the kind of soft self-deception that got people blindsided. She had watched her mother do it for years. She had promised herself she never would. So she knew, clearly and without drama, that she was not the kind of woman that men like Dorian Shade noticed. She was 31 years old. She wore a size 18 on a good day and a 20 on a bad one. She had a round face and dark hair she mostly kept clipped up at the back of her neck, and she had, over a very long time, made a kind of peace with the fact that the world arranged itself around women who looked a certain way, and that she was not one of them. She had stopped waiting to become someone else. She had gotten very good at being exactly who she was, quietly, without asking for anyone's permission. That was not the same thing as being happy about it. She knew the difference. The dinner was her co-worker Priya's idea. Priya worked in compliance and had the energy of someone who genuinely believed that the cure for a bad week was a nice restaurant and a glass of wine, and Willa had learned years ago that it was easier to let Priya be right about this than to argue. So she had agreed, and then Priya had cancelled the morning of because of a work emergency, and Willa had the reservation and the dress and nowhere else to be. The dress was the thing. She had bought it 3 weeks ago, for reasons she still wasn't entirely sure about. It was the color of garnets, deep red, almost wine, with a neckline that made her feel exposed in a way she hadn't decided yet whether she liked. She had tried it on 7 times in her apartment and taken it off 6 of those times and told herself she wasn't ready. She hadn't worn it anywhere yet. She wore it that Thursday evening to a restaurant called Marlowe's, which sat on the 22nd floor of a building in Midtown and had curtained windows and candles on every table and a sommelier who came over without being called. She went alone, and she asked for a table for one and the hostess seated her without blinking, and Willa sat down and ordered the duck and a glass of burgundy, and told herself this counted as being brave. She was halfway through the wine when the room changed. It was subtle. It was always subtle with Dorian Shade. The nearest table of businessmen straightened almost imperceptibly. Two servers who had been moving toward the far end of the room slowed, recalibrated, redirected. The sommelier appeared from nowhere and then disappeared again just as quickly. And then Dorian himself came through the entrance with two men behind him who were built like architectural features, decorative in function only, structurally load-bearing. Willa did not move. She was very good at not moving. She watched him speak to the maitre d' without looking around the room, watched him gesture toward a table near the window, watched one of the large men pull out a chair and then take up a position by the wall. Dorian sat. He did not look at the menu. He spoke to no one. He looked out the window at the city below, and his expression was the same expression he wore in quarterly reviews and board meetings, and, apparently, in restaurants on Thursday evenings, which was to say, nothing. Carved stone, still water. Then he looked across the room, and his gaze landed on Willa. She felt it the way you feel a drop in temperature, a shift in the air, a prickling awareness that something had changed. His eyes moved over her once, and she watched something happen behind them, some brief recalibration, and then his face went perfectly still again, and he looked away. Willa breathed out slowly through her nose. She finished her wine. She did not look at him again. She was very focused on not looking at him when he appeared at her table. She became aware of him the way she became aware of most things. Peripherally, then with increasing clarity, then all at once. She looked up, and he was standing beside her table with his hands in his pockets, and he was looking at her the way she had only ever seen him look at financial reports, like he was assessing something, calculating something, deciding something she hadn't been asked about. "Heart," he said. It wasn't a greeting. It was an acknowledgement, like a door clicking shut. "Mr. Shade," she said, "you're alone. I was supposed to meet a friend." She cancelled. Willa picked up her wine glass and set it down again without drinking from it. "I decided to come anyway." He looked at her for a moment. Just looked, in that way he had that made you feel like you were being read without your consent, your footnotes included. "That dress," he said. She waited. He said nothing else. He pulled out the chair across from her, the one that had been empty all evening, and he sat down. Willa stared at him. "I have a meal coming," she said. "So do I." He glanced toward the window, and one of his men, apparently receiving some signal Willa couldn't decode, moved toward the maitre d' and spoke quietly. "It will come here now. I didn't invite you to sit down." "No," Dorian said. He picked up the wine list, which he didn't need, and studied it with the focused attention of a man who had never in his life done anything without a reason. Willa looked at him across the candlelit table and understood, with the particular precision that had always been her best and most dangerous quality, that something had shifted. She didn't know what it meant yet. She didn't know what she wanted it to mean, but she understood that Dorian Shade, who did not eat dinner with anyone, who was not known to sit at the tables of women in red dresses in restaurants he hadn't planned to visit, was sitting across from her, and he had not said "excuse me," or "this will only take a moment," or any of the things that would have made this a brief, ordinary interruption. He was staying. She let him. The food arrived. It was, objectively, extraordinary. Willa ate hers with the careful composure of someone who had been startled and was determined not to show it. Dorian ate his with the distracted efficiency of someone whose mind was elsewhere, but whose body understood the mechanics. He asked her, between the appetizer and the entree, about the Cressida Holdings reconciliation she had finished the previous week. She told him. Precisely. Without notes. He watched her the way he had looked at her, across the room. With that focused, assessing attention that she had, over 3 years, learned was the most honest thing about him. Dorian Shade had many public expressions and very few real ones, and this, the watching, the listening, the absolute quality of his attention, this was real. "You flagged the Harwick transfer," he said. "Yes, 3 people missed it." 4, Willa said, including the external auditor. He was quiet for a moment. "Why did you catch it?" "Because I was looking." She set down her fork. The number was right. The timing was off by 11 days. It's the kind of error that looks deliberate once you know where to look, but only if you're looking for the right thing. What were you looking for? Anything that shouldn't be there. Dorian considered this. Outside, the city spread itself below them in its nighttime geography. Lit grids, dark spaces, the restless movement of 10 million lives arranged around ambitions most of them would never fully name. "You've never asked for anything," he said. It came out differently than his other sentences. Less flat, more like an observation he'd been sitting with. Willa looked at him. "I know what I signed up for when I took the job. Most people who know what they've signed up for want something for it. I wanted to do the work," she said simply. "I'm good at the work." Another silence. Different quality this time. Less assessing. More something else she didn't have a clean word for. "You are," he said. It was not a compliment. It was a statement of fact delivered in the voice of a man who treated facts as the most valuable currency and wasted neither of them lightly. Willa felt the warmth of it reach her anyway, which annoyed her mildly. They finished dinner. When the check came, she reached for her card and he put one deliberate hand, the first time he had come anywhere close to touching her, flat on the table between her hand and the folder. "No," he said. She looked at him. He said nothing else. She withdrew her hand. Walking out through Marlowe's, through the warm hum of other people's evenings and the soft light that made everyone look like they were living inside a painting, Willa was very aware of him one step behind her and slightly to her left, which was where his men always positioned themselves relative to him. Except she wasn't his man. She was his accountant, and he was not her employer right now, not in this particular corridor, not with her wearing this particular dress, and him having ordered the check away without explanation. At the elevator, they stopped. She pressed the button. He stood beside her. "I walk to the garage on Tuesdays," she said. This was true and also said nothing. "I know," he said. "I've seen you." She turned to look at him. He was already looking at her, and there was something in his expression she had never seen there before. A tautness, a tension, not the smooth control of boardrooms and negotiations, but something more effortful, like a man holding a door, shut against significant pressure from the other side. "Hot," he said. "Still here," she said. "Don't take the Cressida client to the Harwick review next month." She blinked. This was not what she'd expected. "Why not?" "Because you're too good at it," he said. "And the man running Harwick is the kind of man who notices things that are useful to him." She stared at him. "You're protecting me." He said nothing. "You're telling me to stay out of the room," she said slowly. "Because you're worried someone else will figure out what I'm worth." "I'm telling you to stay out of the room," Dorian said, "because I find I have a specific and inconvenient interest in what happens to you, and Harwick has a way of collecting things he finds valuable. I'm not interested in him collecting you." The elevator arrived. Willa stood in the open doorway and looked at him, this cold, controlled, genuinely terrible man who ran a criminal enterprise with quiet precision and had just told her, in the language of someone who had never learned to say things the easy way, that he wanted to keep her close and keep her safe, and had no clean framework for either of those things. "That was almost a sentence," she said. Something moved across his face. It might have been the beginning of a smile. She couldn't be entirely sure she'd ever seen one on him before. "Good night, Willa," he said. It was the first time he had ever used her first name. She rode the elevator down alone, and she stood in it in her red dress watching the numbers drop, and she pressed her back against the cool metal wall and allowed herself, for exactly the duration of the ride, to feel the full, disorienting weight of the evening before she put it somewhere manageable. She expected him to pretend it hadn't happened. That was what she told herself on the train home, and on the walk from the station, and in the 40 minutes she spent sitting on her couch in the dark before she remembered to turn a light on. Men like Dorian Shade, men with empires to protect and reputations built on impermeability, did not carry Thursday evening dinners into Monday morning offices. They filed them away under aberrations and moved forward. She was prepared for that. She had, in fact, already prepared herself for a version of normal that she could live with. She would file it carefully in her own internal ledger, under things that happened once, and she would continue being very good at her job and wearing her grey cardigans and eating lunch at her desk, and it would be fine. She would make it fine. What she was not prepared for was the single-stem ranunculus, white, on her desk Monday morning, in a small glass vase without a card. She sat down and looked at it for a long time. Then she opened her laptop and started the quarterly review. The flower was still there at lunch. At 3 o'clock, she walked past his office on her way to the printer, and through the glass wall, she saw him on the phone, jacket off, standing at the window with his back to the room, and he was turning a pen over and over in his hand the way he did when he was thinking through a problem. He did not turn around. He did not see her. She went and got her printing and came back to her desk and did not think about the pen. The next morning, there was a coffee on her desk. Her order, exactly. The cup was from the cafe 2 blocks east, the one she went to on Wednesdays when she was running early, and she had never told anyone that. He had noticed. The thought moved through her with a warmth she didn't want and couldn't quite refuse. It was the following week that everything changed. She was in the lobby at 6:45 on a Wednesday, waiting for the elevator after an evening finishing the Morrison Close, and she was tired in the specific way that came from staring at figures for 9 hours. Her cardigan was wrinkled. Her hair had come half down from its clip. She had a smear of ink on her left hand from a pen that had failed dramatically at the worst possible moment. She heard him before she saw him, or rather, she heard the atmosphere change, that slight shift in pressure that preceded him everywhere he went. And then she heard his voice, low, precise, someone on the other end of a phone call about logistics that had nothing to do with logistics. And then he came around the corner from the south corridor and stopped when he saw her. He ended the call. "You're still here," he said. "Morrison Close." She pressed the elevator button. "You?" "Vancouver situation." He did not elaborate on what the Vancouver situation was, and she did not ask, because she had learned that some information was better understood by its shape than its contents. They stood together in the lobby, waiting for the elevator. The building was mostly empty at this hour. The cleaning crew moved on the floors above them, audible through the ceiling. Outside, the city had its evening sound. Traffic, distance, the low continuous hum of 10 million lives. "You didn't react," he said. She glanced at him. The flowers, the coffee. He was looking straight ahead at the elevator doors. Most people would have said something. "I'm not most people." "No," he said. "You're not." The elevator arrived. They stepped in. She pressed the lobby level. He pressed the parking level below it. In the 30 seconds between the 6th floor and the lobby, Dorian Shade did something she had not, in 3 years, ever seen him do. He reached over and gently, carefully, with the focused attention of someone handling something they didn't want to damage, tucked the loose half of her hair back behind her ear. She went completely still. His hand dropped back to his side. The lobby arrived. She walked out. She didn't look back. She walked across the marble floor toward the front exit, and she was almost to the doors when she heard him, from behind her, through the closing elevator doors. "Willa." She turned. The doors were almost shut. She could see only a narrow slice of him, the set of his jaw, his eyes, that impossible controlled face with something new behind it, something open and effortful and entirely unguarded. "I don't know how to do this," he said. Quiet. Honest. The most honest she had ever heard him. The doors closed. She stood in the empty lobby for a long time. She came to his office the next morning. This was not something she did. She went to the 3rd floor when summoned, and to the 11th for reviews, and to the basement archive room at quarter end. She did not go to the executive floor uninvited, and she had never in 3 years been to his office for any reason that wasn't formally scheduled. She knocked. He said, "Come in." She came in. He was at his desk, and he looked up, and when he saw it was her, something crossed his face so quickly she almost missed it. A loosening, a relief, as if a grip had released. He set down what he was holding. "Close the door," he said. She did. She stood in front of his desk, which was the kind of desk that communicated, architecturally, that the person behind it held significant power, and she looked at him and said, "I need you to tell me what this is." He was quiet. "Because I am very good," she said carefully, "at not wanting things I can't have. I've had a lot of practice. And I can do that again if that's what this is. But I can't do it while you're leaving flowers on my desk and tucking my hair back in elevators. I can't do both things at once. So I need to know which one you're asking me to do." Dorian Shade looked at her across the expanse of his desk. He stood. He was taller than her, though not by as much as the boardroom mythology suggested. She'd always thought of him as larger than his actual dimensions, because that was what power did. It altered scale. But standing here, in the morning light from the windows behind him, he was just a man, an unusually still man, with grey at his temples and careful hands, and a mouth that had said more true things to her in the past 2 weeks than she suspected it said to anyone in a given year. He came around the desk. He stopped an arm's length from her. "I've spent 11 months, he said, "noticing things about you that I told myself were irrelevant." "What kind of things?" "That you eat the same lunch on Mondays, and then something different every other day. That you hum when you think no one can hear you. That you caught the Cressida error not because you were looking for it, but because something felt wrong to you, and you trusted that feeling." He paused. "That you never ask for anything. That you are the only person on this floor who is not afraid of me. And I have spent a significant amount of time not understanding why, and then understanding exactly why, and finding that understanding considerably more disorienting than the confusion was." Willa looked at him. "I don't know how to do this," he said again. Same words as the elevator. Different weight now, because she could see his face when he said it. "I know how to run operations. I know how to manage risk. I know how to make things work. I do not know how to." He stopped. Started again. "You matter to me, in a way I did not plan for and cannot seem to organize, and I am aware that this is not a simple thing, given the nature of my work and the nature of what I am. I'm not asking you to pretend otherwise." "What are you asking me?" she said. "To let me try," he said. "Whatever that means. However long it takes. To let me figure out how to be something other than what I've always been, in at least this one specific context." The morning light moved behind him. Somewhere below, the city continued its business of being itself. Willa thought about her mother. She thought about every woman she'd ever watched, except a version of something instead of the thing itself. She thought about every morning she had come to this building and been invisible on purpose, convinced that invisible was the only sustainable option. She thought about a white ranunculus on her desk, coffee, exact order, no explanation, a hand at her ear in an elevator. "I don't know how to do this." A man who ran an empire with cold precision, looking at her like she was the only variable he hadn't been able to model, and finding that terrifying and telling her so, which was the bravest thing she had watched anyone do in years. She thought about her dress, garnet red, bought 3 weeks ago for no reason she'd been willing to name out loud. She knew exactly what she'd bought it for. "I have conditions," she said. He looked at her. "Non-negotiable ones," she said. "You want to try, we try on terms I agree to. You don't make decisions about what I can handle, or what rooms I'm allowed in, or what information I'm entitled to. You treat me like someone with equal standing to assess risk, including risks to myself. You don't protect me by making me smaller." He held her gaze for a long moment. "Agreed," he said. It was the way he said it, without hesitation, without qualification, the way he signed contracts he intended to honor. That made her believe him. She nodded once. "All right," she said. He exhaled, a small sound, barely audible, the sound of something held under compression for a very long time, finally releasing. "Dinner," he said. "Not at a restaurant where I also have business. Somewhere chosen for the food and nothing else? Saturday," she said. "Saturday," he agreed. She turned to leave. At the door, she paused. "The Harwick Review," she said. "What about it?" "I'm going," she said. "And I'm flagging everything that needs to be flagged, same as always." He was quiet for a beat. Then, "I'll be there." She smiled. Small, real. The kind she usually only had when no one was watching. And she opened the door and walked back to the elevator and down to the 3rd floor and her desk. And she sat down and looked at the white ranunculus, still there, still quietly insisting on itself. She opened the Morrison file. She started to work. And for the first time in 3 years of careful, deliberate invisibility, Willa Hart let herself take up exactly as much space as she needed, and did not apologize for a single inch of it.